everyone understands house music. It's a spiritual thing.
Hi, thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. Today, I have a guest who is going to give us some education on mindfulness and how to prevent burnout. So, welcome to the show, Denise.
Hi, Zach, and everyone listening. Great to meet you and great to all the listeners joining.
So, Denise, I got an email about Denise, just about her history and stuff. And I want to go through that about how she became a person to help people with burning out. So, tell me, I believe you were a nun, and tell me your history about who you are and how you got here.
Thanks. Yes, I'm a former Roman Catholic nun. I was a nun for 8 years, but I grew up in a family, one of 7 in the Midwest in Kentucky, and big Catholic family, one of 7. So Catholicism was kind of part of our culture or
Yep.
religion. So it's like your DNA. If you're from Louisville or if you're Catholic, it's like it never leaves you, even if you
Yeah.
leave the institution. And anyway, growing up, I went to an all-girls Catholic high school and just really received good mentoring teachers all about and saying, how do you want to live your life? And one of the values of growing up in a family, my family, it was all about, my parents were really strong Catholic, but they firmly believe that you choose like your religion. It's like your relationship with your higher power. And so and then I also had good mentors in high school, and they said, see the world, let it change you, be open to that. So I fell in love with theology when I was studying. Actually, my undergraduate degree is in nutrition. And
Okay.
then I went to seminary, and then I served as a director of worship, and I'm a musician. And so I basically did church ministry since I was in the 8th grade.
Wow.
And I made a pivot at midlife and at realizing that I left the religious community for health reasons. And once I left religious life, I realized I couldn't financially make it in church ministry full time. So I had
Right.
to pivot to a career. And that's where my book, Burn Without Burning Out, the first chapter, I tell my story. The first line is, I'm a former nun now working at Microsoft. And I tell my career story of how I got to Microsoft, pivoting at midlife. I was a church minister in Redmond, Washington at the time. And I had networked with several people in the church who had also been former Microsoft employees that worked with Bill Gates, and saying, I want to pivot to corporate. And I told them what my goal was, just to work at Microsoft. And they looked at me like, yeah, go for it. As your chances are probably slim to none, but go for it. And so I applied 44 times.
Wow.
43 of them were rejections. And
Wow.
one of them was yes. And also in the book, I tell the story about the manager who hired me, who told me the story later of how he hired me. He himself was former Catholic, and he said, I looked at your resume and it had church lady written all over it. I said, at the time when I applied, he literally threw my resume in the garbage can. And then he's sitting there, and then this little voice on his shoulder is saying, hey, you don't like that when people do that to you. And he's, I've got to look at this again. So he pulls the resume out of the garbage can, looks at it, and he says, I rolled my eyes saying, yeah, she does have project management experience. Okay, I'll interview her, as if saying to her, the inner voice, but that's all. I'll just give her an interview. And he said, I interviewed you and I knew I wanted to hire you. And the rest is history. But
Wow.
that sense of the insight of my book about mindfulness, but also about presence, is like your own self-awareness of knowing yourself enough to say, hey, like my manager said, I don't like when people do that to me. I can't do that to you. I got to give you a chance. And he was willing to set aside, he says, I recognize my bias, and was able to set that aside and be open to that. And the rest is history. I've been at the company now at this time of this recording 14 and a half years, going on
Wow.
15.
You just
as
need
a
that one
full-time
person to
employee.
say yes. Just
That's
that one
right.
person. Yeah. That's
And
awesome.
in fact, when I was working on trying to get into the corporate, I just said, I just need someone to give me a chance.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
I think everybody has those stories where they have that one person in their career that kind of either backs them, gives them that good advice, or even hires them and stuff. And it sounds like that's your person. So that's pretty
Yes.
awesome. Are you still in
Yes.
contact with him today? Is he
Yes,
still
and I actually work at Microsoft. This is our 3rd rotation of working together, and I'm just
awesome?
it's this corporate colleague that I've had in these past going on 15 years, which has been fantastic.
Awesome. And so tell me how you got into the burning out and how you decided to write this book. Tell me that story, how you discovered this entire process.
Yes. So my life as a nun, in the Roman Catholic tradition, we called mindfulness contemplation. And
Mhm.
that's really taking a look at life in front of you and really taking it all in with love, with compassion, however, whatever your core values are. And when I pivoted to corporate that first couple of years, I kept thinking in the sense of a high-tech industry, life felt, and it still does today, even so many years later, that our lives today feel like we're in this ball pit in a bouncy house.
Yes,
And
I
there's
agree.
so many balls coming at us. And how do you know which ball to focus on? And I had been learning my skills in the corporate world about like executive presentation, project management skills. But the skills I kept leaning back on were just the personal skills I learned as a nun, how to be present, how to be mindful, how to observe everything going on in a meeting and make sure to bring everyone along. Those kind of skills. And so I nurtured those. And then when COVID hit, one question during COVID was haunting me as a writer, and I decided to write this book. And the question that's in my book says, life keeps nudging me with this question. As an ordinary person, how will you spend your everyday life doing extraordinary, meaningful work with the time you have left? And so then I started writing out this book because I also saw that even during COVID, people were just burned out
Yeah.
and exhausted. This kind of emotional exhaustion, I think, which is a huge signal of burnout, or however how you like. Again, self-awareness is so important. And when I was a nun, that sense of how am I self-aware as an employee, and what are those signals that cause me to burn out? That sense of exhaustion. I exercise, I get enough sleep, but when I wake up in the morning, I'm exhausted. And so then what are those signals to change? And so then I just incorporated techniques that I learned as a nun and then working with them saying, and the reading I've done about mindfulness and some writing coaches, I created this framework of these 7 habits around how do you, if you were to live your day, how do you like set your values, be rooted there, mind the moment, clear the chaos around you, be present, give people grace, practice gratitude, carry a symbol of meaning. Those are some of the habits that I mentioned in the book. And they were working for me. And I shared them with some of my colleagues and they were working for them. So I decided to write the book and share those with people it's targeted toward people who may be early in career or at pivots in their life of midlife, wherever. I've been on several podcasts so far since the book's been published, and I've resonates with many people, from men's fitness to menopause to,
Yeah.
this podcast here. So
Did
it's
you
willing to
have a
share that.
burnout though? Did you go through a complete burnout? Is that what made you
There,
start trying to think of this? Or did you
yes.
almost get to the burnout part?
So even in church ministry, there were moments when I physically got sick and I was just burned out and I thought,
Yeah.
I need a break. And then I take a break and I get well. And I love the work so much. And it's that sense of go.
Yeah.
And even in work today, so what I've learned is now today, like I've had a couple of moments where I felt burned out or the signals of burnout in my work. And with my own self-awareness saying, I need to pivot to another role. I need to talk to, for example, my health, I need to talk to my doctor, or I need to talk to a therapist, or I need to talk to a spiritual director, or I just need to make sure I'm getting enough sleep, or like taking that self-assessment. And then when I started doing that, then it's like coming out of that, those signals of burnout.
What are some of those signals or symptoms that people should look for?
And now that may be different I think burnout is unique to each individual.
Okay.
But that for me, that sense of I'm just drained, that exhaustion, just feeling drained. And my emotions are not there fully there. I don't feel like I'm at my best self.
Yeah.
Or it's chronic fatigue, or just feeling all of my resources are depleted, this complete exhaustion. Sometimes it may show up for people in burnout of just snapping, like being short with patience or frustration or depression or other things in that. But I do believe each person has different signals of burnout. And I remember when I was first experiencing some signals of burnout in one role, I talked to my doctor and when I said, okay, I'm exhausted, but I'm exercising, I'm getting enough sleep. And I think, and then it's, what do we need to do and stuff. So those are that sense of looking at your health holistically and knowing myself and how am I body, mind, and spirit of what I may need at certain times. And having good mentors or good physicians or friends or support system that can help me to say, hey, are you doing okay? Or I also know burnout, a signal is when I physically don't feel well. And there have been moments of chronic illness or things like that. Again, I think those are just unique to each individual. But usually fatigue and that emotional exhaustion that you feel is one of the key signals of burnout. Or you feel the stress, like everything's pressing in on you, or stress of work.
And are you coaching people as well now, or are you just yeah, tell me about that. Tell me a little bit about how
So
you're coaching and helping people.
right now I'm working on developing coaching of one-on-one. I currently have a full-time job, and
Yeah.
so the sense of that work, balancing the work of that. But again, it's like talking to my colleagues, or they may come to me, or one person said, Denise, I love when you lead meetings because I know we'll have a mindful moment.
Yeah.
And that mindful moment, people think it doesn't have to be long. I tell people, let's just take 15 seconds to make sure we're all in the room at this meeting with this agenda, and take a deep breath as an example.
Yeah.
Or just a moment of silence. So the sense of, or asking people when I do coach, I'll say to people, what do you, to colleagues or friends or people that I don't know, that come and ask, so can you help me in mindfulness? And I ask, my first question I ask is, what do you seek? What is it in your heart that you want? How do you want to live your life? There's a quote by a theologian named Thomas Merton, who is an American scholar and theologian. And he asked a question, I quoted in my book, what do you want with your life? To reflect on that. And then the next question is, why are you not there? And so then I ask that question too. And then I say, and then a third question is, what do you need to do to get there? And how can mindfulness help you get there?
Yeah.
In driving clarity, in helping you be self-aware. And so then it's tailored to what people, like when I ask, what do you seek? What do you want? And why are you not there? And what can help you get there? Are those some of that sense of coaching that I do?
Would you ever want to do this full time?
I think that would be my life dream to do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome. And tell me, like, whenever you get somebody comes to you that you've worked with, and you've given some guidance to, and they come back and say, wow, you saved me from burnout, or you saved me from this. What do you think then? What's your feeling?
Let me back up for a second. All growing up in my life, my family taught me that life is about love
Uh-huh.
and about service. And so that's my core values that I'm rooted in. And learning that in school and theology, and then living my life as a nun, and even wanting work to be meaningful. And I'm thinking my goal is to not make meetings boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have fun. It's hard work sometimes in the corporate hectic stress of tech. And when people come back and say, hey, Denise, I tried this technique and it was wonderful, my heart just fills with gratitude and joy for this
Yeah.
person to say, that's empowering. I love empowering other people to find the meaning in their own lives, because all of us are on that same journey. We all live in a moment of finitude. Our lives, we only have so much time, like on earth. We have so much time in a career. And we all have the same 24 hours in a day. There's no exemption. Like somebody
Yeah.
doesn't get to bank. I got to bank 4 extra hours today, so I can
Too
take a little
bad,
bit
though.
more.
Yeah.
But so then how do we make use of that finite time that can be valuable? And when I hear people say, I had a moment today of meaning, and what that happens is that our chronological time, which is counted time, becomes timeless in that moment. And it's called kairos, which is like the timeless moment, or some people call it a God moment. But it's that sense when you get lost in the moment, you forget the time on your watch, and you're filled in this moment. You go, wow, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Whatever that moment was. And you want to say, how can I habit stack my day so that I can have more of those kind of moments?
Yeah.
And yeah.
And what about two things I wanted to say is, one, I had a career coach, and when we did it over Zoom, and every time before we would start, the first thing he would do is he would just say, we're taking a moment, we're taking a minute, we're going to come into the moment to make sure that we're here. It's like what you were saying during your meeting. And we would take and it helped me so much just getting into that moment, just being there with him. And because I was doing it during my lunch hour, let's say during work. And so I'm coming out of other meetings, and I have another one right after that. So I'm spinning. And him doing that for 1 minute just really brought me into the moment. So I
Mm.
understand what you're saying. And the other
Yeah.
thing that I did is I've taken some, and you would think you would need to take classes, but I did a really intense transcendental meditation and just getting myself into that moment. And so whenever you talk about you lose that sense of time, I know exactly what you're talking about because whenever I can
Mhm.
get into that deep meditation, I'm
Mhm.
such a better person like afterwards. Like whenever you're I wish I could be like that all the time.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is that meditation is an excellent form. I call it like this elevated form of mindfulness practice. And then I got to thinking about those of when working in tech and being in tech, and I thought it would be great if we could have a couple hours to meditate. But I thought, who has time for that?
Yes.
And so it's that sense of I call it micro mindfulness. It's the same science that's behind physical fitness of high impact interval training. The shorter, like these short moments of
Mhm.
interval moments of training shows that there is actual impact and benefits to physical health and fitness. And as well, science is showing too, even the short moments of micro mindfulness. I think Ariana Huffington calls them 60-second micro steps.
Yeah.
But that sense of can we do one thing, pause for 15 seconds at each meeting? Or like a friend of mine said, hey, Denise, I decided to pause every hour of the workday. And in my notebook, I have a commonplace notebook and I jot one word for every hour. And I said, you're journaling. Even that's, I call it one sentence journaling. And
Yeah.
I said, look at that every week at the end of the week and find out what the pattern is that you're seeing about
That's pretty
yourself.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the sense of like how to coach people to say you to habit stack. And like I have a newsletter as well about weekly to say to habit stack. I just give examples of habit stacking, micro mindfulness moments. And then that you don't have to add one more thing to your calendar. It's like you do this in the midst of your own morning ritual of getting ready
Right.
for work,
Yep.
pivoting to work, whether you're commuting or whether you're pivoting from home, your personal life to work life, even at your desk. That
And
sense.
do people? I think I understand what you're saying about being mindful in the moment that you're in and stuff. And I think it takes a good amount of practice to do that, though, because it sounds great to do. But what would you give advice to someone whenever they're trying to start this and just to take a moment to be in that moment? Like, how do you do that?
A couple of things. One is that sense of spending even if it's a minute to 2 minutes of just self reflection, asking yourself that question, what do I want? Now, you might make a list of 10 things. And then I
Yeah.
would say just pause and pick one thing
Yeah.
in the sense of just one thing and say, oh, and it's like setting my intention to do this. For example, at the end of the workday, if you realize as an example, I need to pivot from my work life to personal life.
Yeah.
And I do this every week, is at the end of it, I just put my hands on my desk before I shut down my laptop. And then it's
Yeah.
like my hands go there and I just take a moment to reflect on all the stuff that happened. And then if my mind's racing, oh my gosh, I forgot this, I forgot this, then it's okay, flip out the notebook and just jot all that down, get it out of my head,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then stay there. And then taking a deep breath and just tell myself my self-talk to say, this will be here tomorrow. And
Yeah.
then I pivot to home. So it's a sense of that then it's like I can be fully present to my family. But I would say if you want to do just one thing, say like to pause before you pivot, or I want to take a moment of silence before. It's choose one thing and then try that out for maybe several days or a week. But it's also behind that, you're right, it takes discipline. It takes you need to set your intention or like to write it down or something or on your sticky note on
Yeah.
your laptop to say pause after every meeting or whatever your one thing you want to
Yeah.
do. And then it's be intentional about it. And then if it's say
Mm.
this week, I only did it 3 times or once, it's like my encouragement is not to beat yourself up. I call myself a recovering perfectionist. So
Yeah.
it's a sense of that. It's okay. Give yourself grace to
Yeah.
say it's okay and say next week, do I want to do the same thing or do I want to try something else? My recommendation is reflect on your own life. What do you like to do?
Yeah.
What helps you relax? Now, I love Netflix and Hulu and all those things. But if we spend our entire lives doing that on the couch every night, it's like we tend to get lost in someone else's world and not our own.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's like being comfortable with who we are, that we can be comfortable with ourselves having a moment of silence or a moment of solitude with ourselves to say, I love journaling as an example. And can I just journal a few bullet points? Or maybe I don't like to journal. But I use my phone. I love taking pictures. And this is another thing. Every day I'll take pictures throughout the day. But then at night, I'll ask myself, what's the one photo that's really spoke about who I am? And then I put it in my phone. I have an app called Day One Journal.
Okay.
And I use one photograph instead of journaling. And the cool thing about the Day One app is at the end of the year or the end of the month, you can print that in a book. And so you've got something
Oh,
tangible to look back as a
that's pretty
way
cool. Day
to
One Journal app. Okay.
Day One
That's,
Journal app that's on, I apologize, I'm not promoting phones, but I have an iPhone.
yeah.
I think it's for both iPhone and Android that you
Okay.
can do that. But it's been great. I didn't bring it here, but I did it for 1 year when I had a really stressful, feeling burned out year. And I just did one photograph a day. And at the end of that year, I printed it. And then I went back and looked at the book and I thought, wow, it wasn't so bad as a burnout. There were some real meaningful. And so it was an affirmation of the meaningful moments that happened when I thought the whole year was so stressful.
I like what you said also, where you said at the end of the day, you close your computer and you put your hands in your desk. That's so important because I work from home. So it's hard sometimes to say, okay, I'm transitioning from my home office into my home life now because it's the same place. And I have still not learned to do this because I've been working at home pretty much since COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really good technique to say, okay, I'm done now. And just like taking a minute or so and saying, work day is over and moving on.
That's right.
Because I feel like I'm always connected. I'm always can walk back to my office and check one more time. The other thing that I think I'd be curious to know what you think about is at the end of the night, sometimes whenever I've had dinner and I've done whatever I need to do in the evening, I have a million lists going through my head about things I need to do because I'm not in the moment again. I'm thinking about what do I got to do tomorrow? What did I miss today? And thinking, any tips on kind of that as well? Is that
Yeah.
simply writing it down as well?
That could be one option. The other thing is to think about yourself. How do you relax in the evening and unwind? I've seen some tips, or I myself too. I'm a big list maker, and I thought if it's in my head, I also have a recording device on my phone. I'm like, okay, I turn it on and I talk it all out because then I know it's recorded. And I thought, okay, I can get to this later, and then it
Oh, that's a good idea.
transcribes. Like I'm an extrovert, so like I talk to think. I have a lot of friends who are introverts who think to talk.
Yeah.
And so they need a quiet or just solitude to do that. And maybe they can think, but like one of my colleagues, he says, I just write it all down like on a piece of paper and make a list to get it out of my head. And then I
Yeah.
can relax. So again, reflect on your own self. What helps you unwind? As an extrovert, I love to talk, to think, to process.
Yeah.
Or are you an introvert? Or is it like, do you like to make lists? Or you can use an audio device on your phone, or even video, or just make a bullet point list, like as a grocery list.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think this is like what you're doing is so important, especially in today's world where the world is just crazy right
Yeah.
now with post-election and everything else that's horrible that's going on to the world. So I think I love it that just reading some of the description about who you were before our podcast started, just understanding about how you just be in the moment and stuff. And I think
Mhm.
that's so important to think about that, just especially in
Yeah.
today's insane
Yeah.
world.
It is. And that's so important in the sense of, I call it mind the moment. And it's like just getting yourself centered and focused and be present in the moment, even in the moments when it's really hard
Yeah.
or it feels so you're out of sorts. When something happens, like an election, whether you like the results or you didn't like the results, there's still this kind of chaos.
Yeah.
And then, but when you mind the moment, which means being present and aware of the moment, then you can choose how to respond. And
Yeah.
like when we're at our best, I think we can rise above the chaos and be really kind to one another and
Yeah.
present.
Yeah.
I know when I'm not at my best, it's anger. I lead with anger. I lead with frustration. Or, oh my gosh, I'm put my foot in my mouth again. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, like that kind of thing. But once I call it, like, mind the moment. And then when you can clear the chaos to say, okay, this is important. What's important is that, like, for example, post-election is like, what's important for me is I still choose to love.
Yeah.
And that hasn't changed. Like, even when I left religious life, that transition was hard. It
Yeah.
was stressful. But I thought, my desire is still to love and serve. And the life I'm living today I'm still focused on how do I love myself and my neighbor as a Christian, and how do I serve one another, even people, my colleagues, which I love working at Microsoft where I work because it's such a diverse, like I said to my parents, it's like the United Nations in this
Yeah.
little mini city that I played with cars as a kid. And I'm driving into this mini city where it's so like everybody,
Yeah.
here comes everybody. And that's in a good space, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that you've made me realize is that a lot of times I'm not so present. And I think in the moment, and because I've gone on vacation with friends or I'm out to dinner and I've got things in my mind, I'm checking my phone or I'm just like looking at that email or looking at the text message from somebody from work. And I'm just, and after the fact, a lot of times I realize, oh gosh, I don't remember what we talked about during dinner because I was so not even there. So I'm gonna get your book after
Oh,
we're
thank
done with
you.
this podcast, and I'm gonna read it because I think that it sounds exactly what I need probably in my life right now. So
No.
that's great.
Yeah, you touch on something that's a hot topic to me is that we live in a world of distractions that is
Yeah.
so intense in our lives today. I joke about my age. I'm thinking, oh, sometimes I long for 1995 before 1995. But the sense of like internet and our phone. And I remember one time asking my doctor, like, oh my gosh, I'm just worried about my memory and I'm really stressed about that. And she looks at me and starts shaking her head and she says, look, the device that we're holding in our hands is totally distracting. So it's like the sense of find ways to like analog or unwind or let
Yeah.
go to say, you don't have to have your hand on it 24/7. My doctor's saying that. So the sense of our world is so, it's also so instant and immediate and right here and right now. And then, like you said, you bring a great point. I'm in my phone. I'm paying attention to that, watching people in a restaurant. And I thought, these two people may look like they're on a date. They are not looking at each other, but they're texting each other or whatever, but they're engaging. That's not my experience. And again,
Exactly.
how can I observe that without judgment? And then it also, as an experience of thinking, how do I want to continue to do that? Or how do I engage to say, I'm going to choose to put my phone down or to say, how can, and just say, can we engage in conversation during a meal about
Yeah.
with friends? And then sometimes you have to take the phone call because something happens and life
Yeah.
happens. But yeah,
But
you're making a great point about that.
I do see people, and I'm going to try this with my friends. Last summer, there was 9 of us that went on a trip together for a week, and at we were all at dinner together, and everyone was on their phone, and nobody was talking. And these are people that live all over the country, so we were all just seeing each other for that 1 week, and it's just we're wasting our time on our phone. And what I wished after that dinner is that we all would have put our phones in the middle of the table and left them there. And the
Mhm.
next time that we all get together again, that's when I'm going to ask is, can we all just put our phones down
Yeah.
and just pay attention to each other? Because the moments when you live across the country from someone, you don't get those moments are precious, I think. So you're missing out.
They are. And it's those moments it's an opportunity to connect. And sometimes we don't miss those moments. We really embrace those moments to connect. And other times, then we reflect on our day and go, oh, there was a lot of moments I missed.
Yes, exactly.
Opportunities. And so that sense of just being present and aware. And again, not beating yourself up for that moment, but say, this is an opportunity. If I have the opportunity to do this again, I would choose differently. And then
Yeah.
say, I will choose differently. And I know some colleagues say, yep, we have a no phone at our dinner. We eat dinner together and we have no phones at our dinner. And for just that brief moment, those are ways, again, that you habit stack. I call them micro mindfulness. And you really didn't add anything on your calendar, but you did it was a mental shift and a pivot to say, I want to be intentional in this moment and be present in this moment.
It makes so
So
much sense. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that advice and that guidance. That's really great.
Yeah, and it's okay to we are one of the things that I tell people at working in tech and people worry about AI taking over the world. That
Yeah.
may happen, but what makes us human is that we are sensual people. We still communicate and embrace reality through our senses. And
Yeah.
so then how do you use your senses to help ground you in the present moment?
Yeah.
Smelling, like name 5 things you can see in the room when you're with your friends. Or I have younger nieces and nephews, or to make a game of it. What's your favorite color in this room? Or you said to bring people in presence. So the sense of using our senses. And I tell people like in the book, it's I carry what's a symbol of meaning for you, or even having sticky notes to put around my desk to remind me about mind of the moment.
Yeah.
Breathe. That was another. In the book, I tell the story about being a nun, and the first couple of years of being a nun, we called it it's called the novitiate, where it's like training to be like a nun, like some people call it nun school.
Yeah.
And the novice director, she was just this great person of Sister Rosemary, of just really, she was genuinely real. And understanding us as nuns who are new at this, and I said, sometimes I'm worried, like, how do we do this? How do we live this life? And she said that there would be times when we were stressed, and her code word was like, just breathe. Just let the worry go. Just breathe. That was a moment just to pause and just be present. And so again, it's like, you have a code word for yourself to say, stop, mind the moment,
Yeah.
let it go. Self-talk or positive affirmations, because sometimes our mind's racing. We might be sitting quietly, but then it's, oh my gosh, I forgot to get eggs
Yeah.
today, and I need to buy this, and the holiday season shopping, and what's on my
Yeah.
list today? And then it's like, okay, let me get a timeout and write this down, and then do it again, or have a moment to say, let go of the list, just be present. The list will be there.
What's interesting is that I worked with somebody who was a Buddhist, and I was interested in it because I think it's a fascinating religion. And one of the things that he would talk to me about when we went to lunch sometimes is he would talk to me about mindfulness is so much part of the Buddhism religion, and we just say you got to just be in the moment and stuff. So I think it's just interesting that you come from a religious background, and this was it, and it's all about mindfulness again.
Yeah. And be very fortunate, like taking care of my own health and mental health throughout my life. One of the therapists I had, he was a Zen Buddhist, and it was great to have, that reminder, yes, of being present. And I could physically feel it change me to the sense of relaxing in my body.
Yeah.
Or the sense of just taking in a deep breath and letting go of the stress and actually feel it in my body, and then going, I think there's some science around here. And again, reading about mindfulness, Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's a very predominant doctor who's talked about cognitive-based therapy, but also using mindfulness as part of that practice.
Yeah.
And it is. And even those short moments going, I feel so much better, or I've gone into aware of stressful meetings with executives or with colleagues about the work, we're behind on the schedule or something, and feeling that tension in myself. And I thought, wait a minute, I'm leading this meeting. I bet other people are stressed too. And so I told everybody, okay, we're going to take 15 seconds. I'll be the timekeeper. Let's be on camera. You don't have to say anything, but just take a moment to be present for 15 seconds of silence. I did that. And there was an executive on the call who said, wow, I didn't know I needed that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that so it may feel awkward to say do that in your workplace, but if you work with colleagues where you trust one another, that it's not as hard as you think to say, can we practice even mindfulness together?
I'm gonna try it.
I need a moment.
I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it because I have colleagues that I trust, and I'm going to try it next week after this Thanksgiving holiday week is over and see how people think. I think people will actually react to it very well.
Yeah. One of my nieces is a nurse, and she said, Denise, was excited to text me and tell me, I read your book. I decided to do 1 minute of silence with the team, with the staff before one of our meetings. And it was incredible. We're going to do it again. It was like she heard enthusiasm for that. She said, it gave me a whole different perspective on the day.
Yeah.
And I thought, 1 minute. It was just 1 minute.
Yeah.
And so because it's a timeless moment when you're fully interested, whether it's a minute or an hour, who cares? It was like you're fully there in the moment.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Denise. This was a great conversation. If anybody wants to learn more about Denise and to learn about her book, the name of her book is Burn Without Burning Out. And is it on Amazon?
It's on Amazon. Yes, that's available. And I also have my website, DenisePiles.com. There's some free resources there to help you if you want to start learning micro-mindfulness or other insights about my story and my career and how I could help you if you'd like mindfulness coaching. And again, it's more of meeting you where you are and finding out what you seek and how can I help you get there? How can I help you take the steps you need to get there? Because it's closer than you think.
And just for her website, it's DENISE and it's PYLES.com. So DENISE PYLES.com. So check out her website. Thank you so much for being on, Denise. It was a pleasure having you. I think this was a very fascinating conversation. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Jack. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.
everyone understands house music. It's a spiritual thing, a body thing, a soul thing. A soul thing, 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 thing. Not everyone understands house music.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Going to high. Let's go. 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 Get the fuck. Let's go.
Not everyone understands house music.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Going to high. Let's go. 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 Get the fuck. Let's go.